It's been reported that Marvel are going to be forced to abandon the Avengers Doomsday release. So I don't know how credible this is, how reliable these guys are. So I would obviously recommend taking this with a pinch of salt, because I can't speak to the reliability of this report, but we're gonna go with it either way. So, Marvel Studios is reportedly facing a major complication with the release of Avengers Doomsday. While the long-awaited film is slated to hit theatres in December, recent reports suggest Disney may need to rethink its release plan due to Dune Part 3, which is scheduled for a release this year. By the time Avengers Doomsday hits theatres, it will have been over 7 years since we last saw a major Avengers team-up on the big screen. Of course, plenty has changed for the MCU in that time. Endgame saw RDJ, Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans exit as Tony Stark, Iron Man, Natasha Romanoff and Steve Rogers. We're now well out of the Infinity Saga and in the midst of the Multiverse Saga, which some fans feel lacks the cohesion and narrative drive of its predecessor. Absolutely. No doubt. I mean, you can't tell me that the MCU fan base is as invested now compared to 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Amid increasing superhero fatigue, some have also criticised the sheer mass of Marvel releases since Endgame. While the studio has since slowed down and refocused on quality over quantity, there was a point where we were receiving multiple Disney Plus projects alongside a handful of theatrical releases each year. Yeah. That's definitely the case. I mean, I think everyone agrees Marvel's gone down in recent years. I don't know if right now they're focusing on quality over quantity, though. I don't know if that can be said about the current MCU. I think it's probably the opposite. Well, there was a time when we were getting quality and quantity, but you know that's a long time ago now. Things are very different in 2026 for Marvel and the MCU. That's why some have criticised Avengers Doomsday for its seemingly obvious attempts to recapture classic Marvel magic. Downey Jr. is back on the scene, although as Doctor Doom, not Tony Stark, and Chris Evans is also set to return as Steve Rogers. The film is also set to welcome several iconic heroes from older Marvel projects, such as 20th Century Fox's X-Men universe, while Endgame directors Anthony and Joe Russo are back to steer the ship toward, hopefully, box office success. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think there's a strong chance that this ends up being like the most expensive movie ever. I mean, the fact that The Rise of Skywalker cost $600 million when it really didn't need to is telling, because the one thing I'll say is think of the scope of this film, think of the scale of this film, and think of how many people they're bringing in cast-wise. I mean, none of these guys are cheap. They're bringing in RDJ, they're bringing in Chris Evans, they're bringing in Chris Hemsworth, they're bringing in Scarlett Johansson, they're bringing in Hugh Jackman, reportedly. They're bringing in Ryan Reynolds, reportedly. Patrick Stewart playing Professor X. That's not even everybody. I've just listed off a few names there. You know, this is a big cast, and that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money going to the cast alone. I mean, everyone I just named are insanely expensive. Everybody I just named are all need to be paid like minimum 5 million. Minimum 5 million. Everyone I just named. And I just named like a dozen people. All of them need to be paid minimum 5 million, and that's not everybody. So it's going to end up being a very expensive film. But my point is yes, it needs to be a box office success, but actually it needs to be a huge box office success by sort of general standards. But I mean, in this particular case, if this film makes 1.5 billion, that will probably mean that it wouldn't have made much money. If this film makes 1.5 million at the box office, I think this is easily going to end up being a $500-600 million movie, budget-wise, easily. So if it makes 1.5 billion, which generally speaking is a lot of money, but for Doomsday, if it makes 1.5 billion, it hasn't made that much money. That's the thing. That is the crazy thing about it. Amid these criticisms, recent reports suggest Avengers Doomsday may face issues with its release date due to another highly anticipated project, Dune Part 3. According to Empire City, Dune 3, which is due for release on the same day as Doomsday, has an exclusive IMAX release window of 3 weeks. As a result, unless plans change, Avengers Doomsday would not receive an IMAX release until at least January 8th, 2027. Earlier reports told a different story. An October 2025 IMAX slate placed Doomsday among a group of 2026 releases expected to screen in the format alongside Dune Part 3, though no details were provided about priority access or exclusivity. Is the success of Avengers Doomsday inevitable? Even with questions swirling around the film, the appetite for a major Marvel team-up remains unmistakable. Marvel Studios has long been a fixture of IMAX screens, and every Avengers film has debuted in the format, making Doomsday's expected inclusion feel almost assumed. Premium alternatives such as Dolby Cinema may soften the blow for some audiences, but the real story is the scale of interest still surrounding the project. Any absence from IMAX at launch is unlikely to meaningfully dent its box office prospects. Doomsday is Marvel's first true event film in years, with its 4 trailers which focused on Steve Rogers, Thor, the X-Men and the Wakandans, and the Fantastic Four, surpassing 1 billion views in a single month, even after leaks circulated online. Coupled with the Avengers franchise's $7.7 billion global box office track record, the level of hype suggests that, controversy aside, demand for blockbuster Marvel crossovers remains firmly intact. Secret Wars. So, the rumour at the moment is that Secret Wars may be split in 2. Like the way Avengers Infinity War was meant to be Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, like it is in the comic books. It was a 2-part story in the comics. That's how it was going to be theatrically, but then it got turned into Infinity War and Endgame. So Secret Wars may still be split in 2. Russo brothers MCU future revealed. Avengers Doomsday reshoots are still scheduled to take place this April, with Avengers Secret Wars set to begin shooting over the summer. There have been multiple reports about Doomsday filming without a finished script, though that's the norm for many MCU movies. Still, in case it wasn't obvious, these upcoming blockbusters are in a constant state of flux, and a new rumour suggests that Secret Wars could evolve unexpectedly. It is crazy, though, to think about that a movie on this scale, that's having just hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars put into it, wouldn't have a finished script. Surely that would be a top priority, but guess not. Apparently Marvel movies have start filming with unfinished scripts all the time. I mean, I think that's fucking mental, but there we go. Turning this into a trilogy could be a smart move on Marvel Studios' part. Kevin Feige and company will likely have to decide whether Secret Wars becomes 2 movies before seeing the response to Doomsday this December. While that side of things is risky, heading down the trilogy route would allow the studio to extend the multiverse saga and make sure the next era of storytelling, likely the mutant saga, is as good as it possibly can be. That's interesting. Imagine if Secret Wars gets turned into a whole trilogy. That would be next level. That would be next level, because that's really never been done before. Because, I mean, big storylines get turned into sort of 2-part sagas all the time. I mean, the Harry Potter movies ended with a 2-part saga. The Hunger Games ended with a 2-part saga. Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame was a 2-part saga. It was the same storyline. But splitting Secret Wars into a trilogy would be interesting. That'd be very interesting, because that's really never been done before. You'll likely recall that there's been some talk of the Russo brothers sticking around post-Avengers Secret Wars to serve as consultants. Today, My Time to Shine, H, is reporting that Feige wants the Russo brothers to be very involved with the next saga and to direct more films for them, not just Avengers. Thunderbolts director Jake Schreier remains attached to helm X-Men, but there are heaps of exciting possibilities for the Russos beyond that, including Wolverine, Fantastic Four 2, and any number of universe-altering team-ups that don't necessarily revolve around the Avengers. Imagine if Feige had given the Fantastic Four to the Russos. That would be interesting to see. You know, I'll tell you what would be interesting to see. A Russo brothers directed X-Men movie in the style and in the vein of Civil War and The Winter Soldier. I think that could be interesting. I'd like to see that. That would be interesting. Finally, we have word from Daniel Reitman that Daredevil Born Again Season 3 will shoot from March to July, putting it on track for a 2027 launch on Disney+. Fucking loved those first couple seasons of Daredevil over on Netflix. I think it was on Netflix. And obviously they cancelled it. And I haven't seen any of the Born Again stuff. I do want to. One of you guys, let me know in the comments if Born Again is any good and if it's worth sitting down to watch. Because if it's more Disney Plus slop, then I won't bother. But if it is worth watching, then I'll sit down and watch it. One of you guys, let me know. Last year, Joe Russo explained what brought him and Anthony back to the MCU. What's compelling about these 2 new Avengers movies is they're a beginning. He revealed, it's a new beginning. We told an ending story, now we're going to tell a beginning story, aka reboot, aka soft reboot, restart of the whole thing. As for what their Marvel Studios future looks like beyond that, he said, who knows where we'll go from there. Maybe it will be another 5 years. I think we just needed that time and perspective to figure out where it needed to go next, and the only thing that brought us back was the right story. As a reminder, the now confirmed cast of Avengers Secret Wars includes RDJ, Anthony Mackie, Sadie Sink, Benedict Cumberbatch, Letitia Wright, Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, Ebon Moss Backrash, probably butchered that, Paul Bettany, Simu Lee, butchered that as well, and Hayley Atwell. The Russo brothers directed Avengers Doomsday from a screenplay by Stephen McFeely, with whom they previously collaborated on the Avengers and Captain America franchises. Loki and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness's Michael Waldron is also working on the script. So, I think at this point it's pretty obvious. I mean, I don't think I've heard anything officially said on it, but I think it's pretty obvious that this Avengers saga, Doomsday and Secret Wars, and then how many films Secret Wars get split into, if it gets split into a two-part saga, or if they go full-on trilogy and they make Secret Wars a whole ass trilogy, whatever they do, regardless, this era of Avengers movie, this saga of Avengers movies is quite clearly leading to a full-on reboot, soft reboot, restart of the MCU, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's a franchise that would be hard to reboot. I mean, most reboots / remakes never go the way that the studio thinks they're going to go. They just don't. They just there's just the very concept of a reboot is just cursed within the film industry for some reason. But I mean, most people aren't. But I'm really not a fan of reboots and remakes. I think most of the time, it's pointless and it's a cash grab. Sometimes it's necessary and it works. You know, if you're adapting something that's sort of out of date, you know, it's like really old, like, I know it wasn't that good, it somewhat was unnecessary, but something like a few years ago when they redid Mary Poppins, I mean, wasn't a fan of the reboot, but I understand, you know, Mary Poppins is now, you know, that film came out in the 50s, 60s, I can understand that they can go, okay, we could probably redo this. This is sort of out of date now. We can sort of bring this back into the modern era, give it a modern touch. Whatever, fine, I can understand that. But something like the MCU rebooting, I mean, could any of you realistically see anybody else playing Iron Man? Or Captain America, or Thor, and I don't mean like the Falcon as Captain America, or Ironheart as the new Iron Man, or Jane Foster as the new Thor. I mean Tony Stark as Iron Man, Steve Rogers as Captain America, those characters being recast with people who aren't Chris Evans and RDJ. Could you Can you see that? I can't see that. I think, like, RDJ's Iron Man is so iconic. It's almost like recasting Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. And I do think that Doomsday is going to end up under-delivering and underperforming, and it's going to mess up Secret Wars, regardless of whether Secret Wars ends up being one film, two films, or a whole ass trilogy. That's my personal opinion. I think Doomsday is going to end up underperforming and under-delivering. And then they're probably really going to push for, like, a reboot, a restart of the universe. Which, again, and that, really not a fan of. So, yeah, it's looking messy. And, yeah, I'm not a fan of... I mean, to me, it just doesn't sound like good news when a movie of this scale and this level of importance is getting going without a finished script. That just doesn't sound right to me, but supposedly Marvel have done it many times before. Very, very famously, the first Iron Man didn't have a finished script. I think they had about half a script when they started filming Iron Man. But, you know, it's not like they still don't have the resources to hire as many super talented writers as they need. It's not like Marvel can't get the best screenwriters that money can buy, is it? So I don't understand. I don't get it. I really don't get it. But, yeah, that's all I wanted to cover for today. So, yeah, see you later.